Coming back to this session, this is an exclusive conversation between the session moderator, Mr. Govind Singh Negi, and our subject matter expert, Ms. Nandini Sarkar. Govind is an astute HR professional and a business leader, blogger, social activist, and dual masters in computer application and business administration from Symbiosis University, Pune. He is having 20 plus years of its experience in the field of talent management. He has been rewarded as top 100 HR Tech Minds in 2018. He is the Senior Director, Talent Management and Delivery Center Lead for the organization called Triple Global. He is also the founder of HR Success Talk. Welcome, Govind, to this session.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Thank you. Moving forward with the introduction of Ms. Nandini, where she is a director and co-founder of Sequel. She is a graduate in economics and from St. Stephen's College, Delhi University, and the Delhi School of Economics. Nandini, as a part of the Sequel team, has handled labor law compliance audit, and labor compliances. And she also play advisory role for Fortune 500 companies, MNCs, and Mahanagaras and PSUs in more than 90 cities pan-India. Nandini is also the external POSH committee member of eminent companies and an advisor on POSH to several multinational companies in India. She also writes extensively on spirituality at the workplace and holistic living. We welcome you, Nandini, to this session. With this note, I hand over this session to Govind to take it forward. Over to you, Govind. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepti. Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Deepti, and hi, Nandini. Welcome to this conversation. And I'm sure many of us are looking forward to it. I already see near 260 people who have joined us. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. Something which I myself wanted to have more understanding, a lot of questions, a lot of ambiguity around, in the industry about it. So I'm sure that many of those questions will be answered today. We have almost 1.5 hours packed for this conversation. I would like to make it more like a conversation as opposed to kind of an interview with you. And we will definitely give a lot of opportunity to our participant to ask their question. What I would recommend is that guys keep posting your question on the chat box. As a moderator, I will take some pauses in between. I will take questions. I will ask you to raise your hands at that point in time. Maybe Dilip ji, you can, lower your hand. You can raise it when I ask it, and then we'll try to take some questions. I will try my level best to accommodate as many as questions I can, and we would like to be more crisp to your questions so that we can cater more of that. Before I formally kick off this, as I have almost 300 people on this call, I would really like to take an occasion and double down on what Deepti was talking about in one of the slides. We have our awards going on right now called the Excellence Award 2021 with 10 categories. And we are getting nominations across India. 15th April is the last date. 1st May is the day when you have to present your case. And May 15th is the day when the awards will be awarded to all those who qualifies. The reason why I want to put an emphasis here is that I believe that we all do a lot of good work, but we don't have so many opportunities to get recognized for it. And this is the opportunity for all of you to come forward and get recognized for it. And I would like to highlight, as many other initiative of ours, this is also does not involve any money in it. So there is no fee to apply for it. There's no fee whatsoever to get the award. It is only and only on your merits and the case you present in front of our dignities and jury members. So with that said, let me move on to our actual conversation today. Nandini, we'll go to the topic, but I just want to make sure that people know what Sequel is all about and what kind of contribution Sequel has already done in all these kind of labor reforms. So would you like to put some highlight on that before we start?
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you about SQL. So Govind, with all humility, SQL is a class apart. We've been in business of handling compliances for Fortune 500 companies, for multinationals, Mahanavratna PSUs, over 21 years. And the founders of SQL include ex-bankers who worked in foreign banks. It includes people who held very senior positions in government and have contributed to reforms in India. We started the journey as entrepreneurs, but somewhere down the line, they say that life is all about synchronicity, that, it's going to give you opportunities beyond what you ever expected. So when we started conducting business, our core value was ethical compliance, and we never compromised on that. Down the line, we found that, we were also being challenged on behalf of our clients to lobby with government to make changes. I'll give you some examples, Govind. Years ago, it was so hard for companies to get their vendors a PF registration. So many of our clients would tell us that, vendors are being asked for bribes just to get a PF code or an ESI code. So we made a pitch to the Central Provident Fund Commissioner recommending that the PF registration should be unhindered and it should be online. And this was way back in 2012. Accepting our recommendation, the Central Provident Fund Commissioner made PF registration online, no questions asked, no inspectors in the fray. And even today, irrespective of the number of workers, even if you have less than 20 workers, your vendors have less than 20, go and get a registration online without any, inspectors' interference, just on the strength of your PAN card. More important measures that we successfully took up with the government included composite death claim for Provident Fund. So earlier, when a person in the private sector died, the family had to run from pillar to post filling up 10 forms. With our recommendation made to the Union Labour Secretary, the government, introduced a one-page composite form for all EPF members, which means your Provident Fund, your pension, your insurance, all gets paid through one form. Thirdly, we have been actively lobbying with the government, to end Inspector Raj and to introduce e-inspection. To our surprise and delight, our recommendation was accepted, and it is a part of all the labor codes, which clearly talk about e-inspections, electronic maintenance of records. We've also, worked closely with state labor departments. Just before the COVID lockdown, we had, organized a seminar in Bangalore with the entire Bangalore State Labor Factories Department, PFESI, in attendance along with our clients. And there, we raised concerns about online licensing. Over the last 5 years, we've seen a paradigm shift both at the central level and the state level, Govind, where everybody's moved to online reporting, online licenses, online annual composite forms. But in labor, we found, whether it's at the center or at the state, the IT portal infrastructure is poor and is not supportive of the government's ambitious program, to rid companies of inspector interference and to put everything online. So there also, it is because of SQL's direct intervention with the ministry in Delhi, with various, state labor secretaries, that many of these IT issues and IT bugs have been solved. Last but not the least, our managing director calculated and showed to the government that when a private sector employee dies, the benefit he gets under the EDLI scheme is a pittance. On an average, if you run an unexempted EDLI scheme, the average worker was getting only 40 to 50,000 rupees. So based on the calculations done by SQL, 2 years ago, the government announced that the minimum death benefit, that's the insurance part, would be 2.5 lakhs. But we kept pushing the government to give more to the private sector. So this year, the cabinet has approved that the EDLI benefit shall be hiked to 7 lakhs. So I could go on and on. Recently, one of the world's largest e-commerce platforms, Govind, appointed SQL, seeing its track record in government licensing, in clean and ethical compliance, and as a major contributor to reforms, they appointed us to get their licensing and permits done all over India. And in doing that, we've had so many success stories with different government departments, not only labor, where we have reached out to the labor secretaries, the CEOs, and we've told them about, that even today, while you've put the contract labor licensing online, there is corruption. Even today, while you have a common one-window application format across states, so this is called a CAF, Govind. So today, the government's ambitious program is one window, all licenses. But we spoke to them about, the issues, the IT issues, the powers that the inspectors still have to reject an online application. And to again our surprise and delight, we found the government very responsive to the strong lobbying and the consistent, we are not scared. We are not scared what is going to happen to us, because we are so excited to be part of this new India where, things will move cleanly, where ethics and good corporate governance will become the norm for good business. It's Bill Gates, one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the history of business, who reminds us that every business success is bound by certain intangibles. And that intangible, in India, we call that good karma. So they say, do good and good happens. So Sequel today, has been uniquely positioned as a company which has majorly contributed not only to labor reforms, but also to clean and ethical compliance and digitization.
Yeah, I think what stands out to me in this is that, and I think which will be good for our audience to also know, that other than all your business accomplishment, what excites me is that the contribution Sequel has made in liaising with government, telling them what are the pain areas of industry, what industry is thinking, and asking them to make changes, amendments in the plan they had. And I
Yes.
think that's why this conversation becomes very interesting, because the wage code is going on. There are a lot of questions coming up. Government is also reaching out to
Yes.
organization like Sequel or platform like HR Success Talk for seeking questions which their members have in their mind.
Yeah.
HR Success Talk is a community of 1,25,000 members. And I can tell all the people on the call that all the questions you're going to ask today, of course, Nandini is going to answer them. But at the same time, if there is any question or suggestion which we feel that is worth taking to the government
Yes.
after this webinar, we will send a letter to the Labor Ministry and we will tell them that these are the questions coming from our industry leaders, and they should look into those questions and make sure when they are coming up with their final stuff, or maybe in future when they plan to amend it a little bit more to make it more make it better for our people, then we will be able to make an impact out there. So keep asking questions right on the chat box. We will take a pause in between to take your questions as well. So I think these are really good stuff which we're going to do today. So Nandini, before I go into the specific of the questions, I think it would be good for the audience to know, when we talk about this whole thing going on right now, the change in the code, the labor law going to change, the people are assuming something is going to happen drastically. Can
Yeah.
you give an overarching view,
Yeah.
a summary of what it is all about, what's happening, and briefly how it's going to impact us, and then we will go into the more detailed questions.
Yeah. So Govind, may I start by busting one myth? The myth is that, the labor codes is going to be driven by notifications. That's myth number one. Please bust that. So if we see, a lot of people ask us that, like last year, we started doing sessions in preparation for what is coming with our clients. And we kept telling our clients, the labor codes are not something which the government suddenly introduced in 2020. There's a history of reforms which rolled out right from 2014, when the government introduced e-licensing, contractor compliance on the cloud, fixed term employment, amendments to the gratuity scheme, the maternity scheme, the bonus scheme, right? So it was work in progress. But Govind, I would urge you and the HR community to reflect. How many of those changes have happened through legislation and how many have happened through administrative circulars? Let me give you, one big example. We all know today the Provident Fund benefit has become Aadhaar linked, both for you as a direct employee as well as for your contractors. But tell me, anybody opening the Provident Fund Act and scheme, where does the PF Act and scheme say that, UN linking will happen through Aadhaar verification? In fact, surprise, surprise, the Supreme Court, delinked. They passed an order saying that you cannot have Aadhaar verification for Provident Fund. But still, the EPFO found ways to make this the benchmark. So, and that continues all across the labor codes, whatever, benefits the government is talking about, whatever IDs. So all along, employee ID used to be the core ID to identify a person. Down the line, it became UAN, Universal Account Number. And now the government is talking about 2 new identifications for every company. So apart from your GST and your PAN, each company or establishment or factory in this country shall be identified by a LIN, a labor identification number. And a lot of clients, who are into mergers and acquisitions have been telling me that their foreign consultants or global consultants are already asking them to focus on 2 things as part of due diligence for mergers and takeovers, which is LIN, labor identification number. And, interestingly also, equal remuneration. So those are 2 things. So what's the second thing, which is going to change? So the government is offering a lot of SOPs. By SOPs, I mean exemptions, liberalizing the way you do business. However, to balance that, they are also bringing in a lot of obligations for you as the principal employer, as somebody who deploys contract labor, and as somebody who also deploys subcontractors. So I'd like to elaborate on this. So, for me, the first takeaway, or for, sequel, the first advisory that we give our clients is, let's break down how you are going to restructure your salary. Now, what is hidden into this, Govind? And what is hidden into this is, certain discrepancies, which you rightly said, we've already highlighted to the ministry, and we will do it again through the HR Success platform, which is such an esteemed platform. So first of all, when our clients came to us asking for advice on restructuring salary, what did we look at? What are the components for provident fund wage? What are the components for statutory bonus wage? What are the components, surprise, for maternity benefits? Because, in a lot of discussions, I see people missing the maternity benefit piece. What are going to be the components for international workers provident fund and compensation? What are going to be the components for how you decide on the structure of your manpower suppliers? Because, clients keep coming back to us asking us whether this is looking rational. So I'll get into the details later, Govind. But, while everybody is talking about one wage definition across all 4 codes, trust me, that has not happened. There are a lot of discrepancies. Let me give you one example. In the existing Bonus Act, eligible employees for statutory bonus are those whose monthly salary is up to 21,000 a month. The new code on wages removes the ceiling, does not clarify that. Does it mean that now statutory bonus shall be irrespective of the ceiling of 21,000? Shall it be applicable to the CEO of the company also? It is silent. So we've sought a clarification on this and we'll seek it again. The second thing, it is completely silent on international workers provident fund components. Now we know, like international workers have various extra allowances like a hardship allowance, a spouse allowance. The code is silent on, how you are going to treat those. Secondly, a lot of clients have asked me this question, that their provident fund contribution is not capped at 15,000. So their question to us is that suppose currently I'm paying provident fund contribution on total basic. Now, will I have to pay provident fund on 50% of wages, or can I continue to keep it only on basic? That's a very, very important question, Govind, because tomorrow a roving inspector might just tell you that just because you're paying above 15,000 doesn't mean you shouldn't pay on the total 50% of wages. For gratuity, currently, we are paying gratuity, industry pays on basic and DA. Now it has to be paid on 50% of wages. In maternity, there is a question. Maternity benefit also, somebody goes on maternity leave, they are saying, pay the wage, but now the definition of wage has changed. So do I pay 50% of the wage during maternity or do I pay the whole? That government is silent. It's a discrepancy. They have to answer that. So the cost of, compensation, payroll, and also a lot of companies are CTC driven. So here is the proposition. Most of you are reading in the media that, net take home pay is going to decrease because the PF wage is going to be 50%. But what they're not telling you is the government has proposed to reduce the PF rate from 12% to 10% for certain establishments. Now, suppose that happens, then in balance, where does your CTC stand? Do you have a component in your letters, in your appointment letters saying that if the PF rate falls, then, we make up for it in some other way. And if it increases, then also, net, this is what we are offering you. So those questions are what, our clients have been looking at. The other thing, Govind, is the, contract labor is now no longer a dirty word in Indian labor law. It's completely legal, legitimate for you to engage contract labor as you wish, when you wish, and as you want. The only thing they're saying is ensure that every contract labor has appointment letters, PF and ESI. And I'm going to elaborate on this. Now, the definition of contract labor has also changed. They've said the regular employee of a contract labor who has PF, ESI and who has an appointment letter is not to be considered a contract labor. Secondly, it says that a manpower supplier is legal as long as he has appointment letters, PF and ESI in place. Thirdly, they've broadened the definition, to say that if your industry was habitually relying on contract labor to get its normal activities done, continue. So despite, so the earlier word, which was weighing on everybody, which was leading to a 240 days kind of cover up. So a lot of companies, would have a system of tracking 240 days of contractual deployment and then taking a break and then restarting. You don't need that cover up anymore because the government is saying it's legit, provided the PF, ESI and appointment letters are in place. Fixed term employment, which is also an extension of contractual employment, is also in place. It's legal, provided social security is in place. Now, how does the compliance obligation change? It's completely digital. So the good news is right from your salary slips to your contract labor salary slips to contract labor registers to registers under the different codes, everything goes online. That's a big relief. So we do not have to keep hard copies, in our factories, in our establishments anymore. But on the other hand, they are making you liable for your contractor's compliance also. Let me explain. I started by saying that, I'd like to bust a myth by saying you have to rely on the labor code notifications to know what the government wants you to comply with. As an example, Govind, I'd like to share with you and the audience that right in January 2021, the EPFO, working on the government's ambitious plan to cover unorganized sector workers for Provident Fund and ESI, has launched a new scheme on the Principal Employers UN portal. Every month, Govind, the principal employer shall have to upload the individual contractor's PF statement on his own UN portal. Can you believe that? Along with the work orders. So on the one hand, they are liberalizing contract labor. They are saying it's not a dirty word, go your way. On the other hand, they're saying that because there have to be checks and balances, you have to be directly responsible not only for contractors and subcontractors. Another very important legal input, the definition of employer has changed to include a contractor. So earlier, the word contractor itself, had carried the word abolition. It was a dirty word. Everybody had to be permanent. Now it's legal, but the checks and balances are. Today, the definition of employer includes contractor, which means the principal employer and the contractor are equally responsible to ensure compliance. And I want to, just share another interesting news. This UN portal requires not only you as the principal employer to register your contractors. Parallelly, your contractors have to register you as the principal employer on their portal. And it's your job to ensure that they do it. And, I want to share with the audience that, because I said the government is not taking the legislative route, a lot of clients said, it's circular here, so why should we follow it? We kept telling them circular nahi hai because ye UN portal mein aa chuka hai. And just after we said that, the government has started sending notices to all establishments saying, do the UN portal compliance for your contractors, register them and start uploading their records. So all our clients have taken this very, very seriously, and we've already started the job for them. So the last, part that I'd like to talk about before, we take questions so that it doesn't become a monologue. Apart from the digital, reporting that I spoke about, the government is planning to launch multiple portals on which you'll have to report compliance under the different codes. So for instance, they are planning to launch a Samadhan portal. Now the Samadhan portal is supposed to be a torch bearer of IR. Your grievance committee, the grievances raised by any private sector employee, the conciliation procedure, retrenchment approvals, all are going to happen through Samadhan at the state level. So, I also want to clarify another important point, that most private sector companies report compliance to state labor. Now, their, compliance obligations are going to increase because they will continue to report compliance centrally to authorities like the EPFO, the ESI. And at the state level, they'll continue to, report compliance to the states. I want to share with you, Govind, that over the last 1 month, about 7 states have come up with draft rules. So what is the summary or essence of those draft rules? Largely, they're talking about, changes in the register maintenance. They're talking about online licensing, which is already there. They have echoed the definitions under the 4 labor codes in terms of you are free to engage contract labor provided there are checks and balances. And in some states, they've increased the cost of contractor compliance. Now, at the central level, you are supposed to pay now a journey allowance for every migrant labor who works for you, even though he's come to your state on his own and he's worked somewhere else before joining you, even then. Some states, like Uttarakhand, UP, have introduced funeral allowance, funeral expense. Also, that means if somebody dies in your service, you are supposed to pay 15,000 extra over and above employees' compensation. Also, the government has set up a national reskilling fund. So if you retrench somebody, in addition to the retrenchment compensation that you pay them, you have to contribute 15 days salary to the government's fund so that the government can reskill them. Also, very interestingly, and this was in the news, with some top companies already consulted by the government is planning to set up 3 boards at the national level with sister concerns at the state level. So these boards are the National Wage Board, which is going to set a national level minimum wage. There's going to be a board on national occupational health and safety. It comes with a cost. Suppose there's an accident in your premise or factory, 50% of the penalty that you pay will go to this fund, to support its maintenance. So that's an added cost. Journey allowance, funeral allowance, national reskilling fund contribution, contribution to national occupational health. And the biggest, the contributory factor comes in terms of unorganized sector workers, National Social Security Fund. So Govind, for your regular employees, regular contractors, the Provident Fund ESI compliance will go to the center. But for gig workers, platform workers, any self-employed professional like a lawyer, a doctor, a driver who's self-employed, or an architect who's self-employed and is a consultant to you, is not covered under the central schemes. They will expect you now to deduct the PF and ESI contributions from the monthly invoices and deposit with the state. So already among the 7 states that I mentioned to you, Govind, the state of Uttarakhand has already come out with this scheme and its rules, saying that we are setting up this state level social security fund. And for every aggregator, whether it's a cab service, it's an Ola cab that your executives are taking, like I said, the self-employed professionals who work for you, you will have to contribute to their PF and ESI in these state level funds. So this is the overarching, framework under which we'll have to work. And again, I cannot reiterate this enough, Govind. Do not be misguided or do not be waylaid thinking that you are waiting. You'll have to wait for some notification to come. The government is moving very fast. You will have to, keep track of the digital footprint through which they are introducing these changes.
Yeah, I think it's a very extensive, extensive understanding of what it is all around. So I think maybe let me give a structure to it so that our audience can kind of be in one part and then move to the second part in that way. And I think one question which comes to everybody's mind, earlier the thought was that, hey, it's going to start from April 1st. It's going to be implemented from April 1st. Now we know it's not getting implemented from April 1st. So maybe people are now wondering that maybe they can leverage the interaction you are having with the government agencies to understand, do you know when is that going to be implemented?
Govind, like I said, it's already started. I mentioned as an example that in January, the EPFO introduced contractor compliance reporting monthly in the principal employers UN portal. So its objective to cover that under the Social Security Code is already implemented and it's started enforcing. Secondly, the digital footprint, that all the labor codes are talking about, the state rules are talking about are already there. So, people in the audience who are handling compliance already, know they're filing annual composite returns. I was very interested to read while I was, reading the state level draft rules. They kept, they've all said that the shops and establishment remains intact. The reporting under contract labor remains intact. So those things are already there. So the labor codes has formalized this by saying now everything is going to be digital, including contract labor records being maintained digitally, including contract labor wage slips. So let none of us be under any delusion that, we are still waiting for a commencement date. It has already commenced. And the biggest impact in terms of, cost of CTC, cost of compensation, cost of this extra compliance, it's time. We have to use this time. I'm very glad that industry got this breather, because we needed the time to look at so many complex things. And like I said, the entire concept of wage is different. We feel, because, for instance, the maternity. If somebody goes on maternity, do I pay 50% of the wage, or do I pay the entire wage? Do I pay bonus to everybody, or only those, whose salary is up to 21,000? Until and unless these clarifications come, driven by platforms like yours, which are demanding answers from the government, the time is, right for us to take this very seriously, and to get our homework in place. And I was really inspired by our clients who did so much homework. Right from last year, Govind, I saw our multinational clients, our PSU clients, constantly discussing with us, constantly drawing up salary structures, because the writing on the wall is very clear. It is here to stay.
So I think that's really awesome to know that. And I think Vinod Pushpan is also asking that question in the chat, when this will get implemented and all the stuff. It's very interesting to know that actually it started in bit and pieces, and maybe because we are not getting a formal notification, that might be a confusion, but somewhere that government has started implementing it in some or other way. So keep looking at those changes which are happening at different portals, and the changes which our government is asking us to do, maybe not as a part of the holistic view, but in bit and pieces. And Nandini, there are a lot of questions already coming. I think your overarching view has triggered a lot of thought in people's mind. So I will like to take some questions, and the way I want to do, guys, is that I would like you to raise your hands, and I can pick one by one, and then I will ask my team to unmute you, or you can unmute yourself. Ask your question. My only request will be very crisp to your question, straightforward question, and get the answer. Meanwhile, you are raising your hands. Let me pick some question from the chat for you, Nandini. One of the interesting question from Usha is that it's about gratuity, and she's saying, can gratuity be shown under CTC? That's the question number one. Question number two of that, which is a part two, is if employee resigns after, let's say, 1 and 2 months also, whether the company is liable to pay gratuity. Sorry, I think she meant whether the person resigns after a certain period of time, not necessarily completes 5 years, will that person be eligible? So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, excellent questions, Usha. So part one, so the code on wages, has excluded. So in the labor laws in India, the word CTC doesn't exist. What the code on wages has done is it has spoken about inclusions, exclusions, and conditional inclusions. So, any benefit that you make towards a statutory bonus, a provident fund, a pension, is a gratuity, is considered to be an exclusion. They don't consider it to be a part of wage. So, can you keep it as a part of CTC? Yes, of course, because the labor laws are silent on it. They've not commented on it as a wage. But Usha, for the purpose of calculating gratuity, the definition, of 50% of last drawn pay and not basic and DA has to be kept in mind. The second part of your question that, is gratuity to be paid proportionately? No, the proportionate gratuity is to be paid only in case of fixed term employees, which means that if somebody works for you, on a fixed term contract, even for 3 months, then that person, becomes eligible for gratuity. For regular employees, the earlier existing threshold of 4 years, 8 months, which is how 5 years eligibility is seen, Usha, remains. So in normal cases, the 4 years, 8 months being the threshold for eligibility for gratuity remains. For fixed term employees, you have to pay them proportionately irrespective of the tenure.
That's great. Thank you. And I think that's really, really, really interesting to know that it's only for fixed term employees and not for the regular one. Another interesting question again from Usha, and then I'll take question from people who have raised their hand, is if the number of employees is less than 300 in a company, is it necessary to have or follow model standing orders?
Wonderful, excellent. She is very updated. Now, Govind, if her organization is, reports compliance to state labor, then that threshold is not applicable. I'll give her an example. During COVID, most of the states linked issuance of contract labor registrations and renewals and amendments to having model standing orders. Why did that happen? Because the government was receiving complaints that there was a lot of hiring and firing random going on during the COVID time. So to prevent that, the state labor departments of all the major states, Usha, started linking your contract labor registration, renewals and amendments to your having a model standing orders. So even, in remote states, we were stunned to find that when we went on behalf of a client to file for a CLRA renewal, they said, where is your model standing orders? And the good news was they didn't expect us to go and get it certified. They just wanted us to show that we have this. So Usha, the IR code, which raises the threshold for model standing orders to 300, is going to be applicable to companies which are mainly, oil companies, banking companies, which report compliance to the Central Labor Commissioner. If your company falls under the Central Labor Commissioner, then your threshold remains 300 for model standing orders. However, if you are reporting compliance to local state authorities, then you will be guided by their administrative directions, which are very clear. Across India, the mandate now is have model standing orders. Also, Usha, I want to discuss with you that to support its intention, this year in January, the central government came out with model standing orders for the services sector. So, Govind, this is another first in India labor law that earlier, there was no model standing orders beyond manufacturing. Then they extended it in 2013 to the IT sector. And this year, they've called it out as model standing orders for the service sector, right? So we have to be in, no sort of confusion whatsoever that every company now must have model standing orders, not only in English, but the mandate is also to have it published in the local languages wherever you're operational, to display it on the notice board and also to have it on the intranet.
That's awesome. And so now I think I can take question from people who have raised their hands. I can see 2 hands being raised. So Anand Arora, I would like
but I would like to compliment Usha, for asking such incisive questions. It was a joy to really answer those questions, Usha.
Yeah, great. So Anand, can you just ask your question first, and after that, Dilip Kumar, is your turn.
Thanks for allowing me, Govind. Nandini, my question is, ESI contribution by the employer is not specified as a very clear, exclusion. So will this be also considered as an exclusion, or it will not be considered as an exclusion in those 7-8 exclusions that have been provided by the Government of India?
Excellent question, Anand. I'm making a note of this. We'll also add it. You're absolutely right. They've only called out the Provident Fund and pension contributions. They've not spoken about ESI. But if we were to draw a parallel, then we would say that is also excluded. But what I'll do is I've made a note of this question and we're going to ask the ministry for a written clarification.
Thank you, Nandini. Dilip Kumar, if you are ready, you can ask your question. And Mr. Anand, you can lower your hand, please. Okay. Dilip, you're here. Okay. If Dilip is not ready, can I ask T. Mahendra Reddy to unmute himself and ask your question, please? Can you somebody unmute T. Mahendra?
Yeah, hello. Yeah. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. My question is regarding this linking of Aadhaar card with the UN number.
Yeah.
Actually, recently, the Supreme Court has given judgment regarding it is not mandatory for except government-sponsored schemes. Linking of Aadhaar is not mandatory.
Correct.
Then now these PF people are asking to link the Aadhaar card. Otherwise, your contributions will be not accepted from next month, May onwards.
Correct.
What is the correct? How far it is correct, madam?
It's absolutely, sir, this is absolutely established. No? So in my introductory remarks, I did mention that the government is not following the legislative route to get its reforms mandate done. It is following the route of administrative circulars. So, sir, even after the Supreme Court order saying you shall not link Aadhaar, the EPFO found a way out by saying that dispensing social security benefits, which is a payment-based, system of benefits, requires Aadhaar to validate. Otherwise, there can be fraud. So taking cover under, I shouldn't say taking cover, because I personally am all for Aadhaar enrollment. It reduces fraud, and it's a very simple, biometric validation. Now, so the government, the EPFO, the ESI, and now under the new labor code, sir, the government has made it a mandate. One extra compliance they're asking you to do, sir, is that all interstate migrant workers, unorganized sector workers, gig workers, platform workers, which will include many of your transporters, logistics, and other self-employed professionals, you have to, as principal employer, sir, you are required not only to maintain the Aadhaar database of your direct employees for their provident fund, but also ensure that your regular contractors are maintaining Aadhaar. Many of our, manufacturing clients have a system now, sir, that they do not allow a person to enter. The contract labor is not allowed to enter unless the Aadhaar is in place, because the PF and ESI benefits cannot be dispensed. So the EPFO, the ESI, and the labor codes taking resource to the, the legal provision that Aadhaar linking is required because there is a monetary benefit to be transferred. They have legalized this, and the Supreme Court has not raised any objection to this.
Okay.
Thank you, Nandini.
Thank you.
And we have many questions coming up, so let's try to cover them quickly. Deepak Kumar, you are next. You can ask your question. After that, Mahadevan, you will be next, so be ready. So Deepak Kumar Das, you can ask the question.
Yeah, good afternoon, Nandini.
Very good afternoon, sir.
One is, first question is on the concept of 50% of total remuneration. Means I am talking about the wages.
Right.
And second question is on fixed term employment. About
Right.
the first question is that normally in what happens in so many companies, in the CTC structure, that government
Yes.
in government notification, it has been mentioned that wages should be 50% of total remuneration. Am I right?
Correct.
So can we consider the CTC, total CTC for the total remuneration, or it can be a gross salary, or for what exactly the amount?
Yes, sir. So it's a very good question. As Usha had also raised this question, the answer is the India labor law, including the labor code, sir, have no concept of CTC. It is an alien concept for them. So we should not be guided by that. As you rightly said, sir, we should be guided by notional salary, which is all the fixed components of salary that are showing up month on month. Now, in a recent seminar, somebody asked this question from industry, that in their industry, there are a lot of variable components. So they said, how is the labor code going to look at the variable components? So, while this is another question for the government to clarify, if you look at the existing precedent, so the first part of your question, sir, is that since there is no mention of CTC, you should be guided by the fixed components of notional salary or gross pay. The other part is that, if your company has a system of, variable incentive, other variable components, the existing benchmark under the ESI is that any variable payment which is recurring for more than 2 months is to be considered as wage. However, on this point also, we have sought a clarification from the government.
And about my next question about the fixed term employment. So if we are taking the GETs, so can we consider them for fixed term employment, or they will be eligible for gratuity?
Yes. So, anybody that you hire for a fixed term employment, there are 2 compliances that you should keep in mind. First of all, the appointment letter, that you're issuing, that has to be rightly worded in terms of the notification issued by the central government in 2018 on fixed term employment, why it is being proposed, what form. So, having a right appointment letter using the right legal language is very important. Secondly, sir, not only, will you have to pay the proportionate gratuity, but in case the payment is less than 15,000 a month, you will also have to pay them provident fund. Another interesting thing is that when you're hiring somebody as an FTE, you will have to get them to sign the PF Form 11 declaration, in which they will state whether they have a previous PF membership or the PF membership does not exist. If an FTE has an existing or previous PF membership, you have to continue that irrespective of the salary or compensation that you'll give them. Secondly, if they are within ESI limits, you will have to extend ESI also. If you know you're hiring them for a certain length of time, then the leave policy, the leave encashment also becomes payable. And 100%, government has said that gratuity shall be payable proportionately. So all these four components, the PF declaration and Form 11, the ESI or medical insurance, not only that, another additional compliance, comes in terms of pre-medical verification. So even for an FTE whom you're hiring for the first time, they want you to do a medical examination either before he or she joins or within 15 days of joining. You have to keep it on record. And if there is a medical scheme of examination for the company, that person participates. And if the person is outside ESI, you have to give the medical insurance as well. So all the benefits, as per your standing orders, as per your HR policy, are equally applicable to the fixed term employee with due legal documentation in place.
Well, that was really, really interesting to know that for fixed term employees, these things have to come in place. I'm sure there are a lot of things which now the HR function need to be deliberate about. So good to know.
Yeah, so Govind, if I may again reiterate, the word I used is checks and balances. So there are no free lunches, as we commonly say. So while the government is liberalizing everything, they are asking you to keep certain digital records. By digital, I mean that, 1 year down the line, if a labor inspector shows up and he says that produce your fixed term employment records, you can't say I'll have to get it from the go down. You will have to have an online compliance portal where the FT's previous PF Form 11, previous thing, the full and final settlement, all these records will have to be digitized by HR and maintained online, to show the visiting inspector or to show the e-inspector, because now they started sending e-notices, where you will have to give them documents online.
This is a question to my mind, and I think it's been a question since many years that appointment letters, increment letter, promotion letters, all the communication we're having with our team members. Can we keep, the soft copy of that as opposed to a hard copy?
Absolutely. And, this was further substantiated by the government during COVID. I'll give you an example, Govind. During COVID, the EPFO introduced e-sign. Now, there's a system that if you are changing your employer or managers, you will have to report it online by way of a digital signature on the PF portal, right? Now, during COVID, it was not possible for you to visit the PF office and get it done. So the EPFO, the Ministry of Labor, notified that e-sign is fine. Digital signatures are fine. So even if somebody has a digital signature or e-sign and you insert that in your documents, they are accepting that. So to answer your question, digitally signed increment letters, appointment letters, wage slips, other registers are now completely legal.
So now this is another interesting question on digital signature. And I think that's the question I was also struggling myself. So many companies use digital signature tools, which are available in the market, right? And you use them for different kind of contracts you sign. Does these kind of tools bound legally? For example, if I want to make an offer to a candidate and I don't want to send an email and all this stuff, and I just want to send an offer letter through a digital signature platform, and that person signs it, does it hold the legality? Or same case with appointment letter. Now with work from anywhere thing coming up, we can't send appointment letter or through courier and get it back. That's a lengthy process. Can we just send an appointment letter through a digital signature platform, get signed, get it back? Will that have a legal stand?
Absolutely. So, all along, it was already supported by the Information Technology Act and rules of this country, which was supporting this. But, labor was pretending that they didn't know this law existed. Now, through the labor codes, through the interventions of the Union Labor Ministry and state labor also during COVID, it is perfectly legal. Now, what are the checks and balances? So everything that we are liberalizing, remember, comes with a certain checks and balance. So you will have to have this documented in your ISMS policy. So tomorrow, if they say, how did you suddenly decide? What are the checks and balances? Who gets to see if the digital signature is valid? So, recently, while conducting a major licensing and permit project for a major client of ours, we have applied across the country for this client for their government licenses across different departments, labor, FSI, trade license, using only the digital signatures of the directors, and it has passed muster. So I am adding my testimony to this, that over the last 6 months, we have obtained hundreds of licenses from different government departments, including labor, just on the strength of a digital signature, but we had the proper documentation in terms of board resolutions. So the board, has to resolve that these are the, designated officers whose digital signatures will be carried across, the following applications. So once that is recorded, once you have your ISMS policy in place, you can show an inspector, then you're good to go.
Makes sense. Thank you. Okay, so let's go to Mahadeva. I know he was waiting since long. So Mahadeva, you can unmute yourself and ask your question. All right, if Mahadeva is not available, I can take, what is it? Banner Joy, you can unmute yourself and ask your question. Let me ask you to unmute. All right, so let me take Paras. I can see you, so at least you can unmute yourself and ask your question. I have asked you to unmute.
Sir, good afternoon.
Hello.
Good afternoon, sir. Mahadeva here from Bangalore.
Mahadeva.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, sir, I got it, sir. I got it. Clarification from Nandini, madam. Thank you, madam. Thank you so much.
Okay, great.
Ahead,
so I would request everybody who already got their answers during the answers of other people's question can lower their hand. Paras, you're still on. Do you want to ask a question?
Good afternoon, Govindji. Good afternoon, Nandini ji. How are you?
Yeah, how are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm fine. I had two questions regarding this new labor reforms. Gratuity in fixed term contract that is to be paid for 1 year. That is going to implement from this month, April 2021.
No. So, Govind, there are two things. That, the fixed term employment notification was issued way back in 2018, though it is not yet being enforced. Right in April 2018, the Ministry of Labor said that if you're hiring somebody on a fixed term basis, then irrespective of the length of service, you should make gratuity payable. May I, suggest, now the labor codes have not yet commenced. So you can always say that since it is repealing all the earlier notifications, why should I pay? May I suggest, Paras, that, you reach out to your local DLC and seek a written clarification. That would be very important because, our understanding is they expect fixed term employments to come with the commensurate benefits, especially if you're not hiring through an agency and if you're hiring the fixed term employee one-on-one, then your liability increases even under the current scenario. So the best thing would be to seek a written clarification from the DLC.
I think Paras has one more question, but he's on mute. Paras, I'm asking you to unmute yourself and you can continue with your question.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Nandini, I had a second question. Is there a criteria to have a percentage of employee in company's payroll and contractors' payroll? Because last time labor inspector came over here, he was insisting to have a 70% of population on company's payroll. Is there a criteria for that percent of population?
No, not at all. Not at all. Also, Paras, today you can take strength and you can contest this with the local department. Let me cite to you the conditions that the new OSH code is talking about. First of all, even under the existing laws, there is no 70-30 notification at all. They cannot impose it. Also, Paras, it is very important to note that the Supreme Court in a series of judgments has said that no DLC shall decide on contract labor engagement. It is a policy decision that has to be taken by the government and no DLC can do that. So what I will do, Paras, I will share some of these judgments with you offline through Govind. You can have a look and you can draw strength from that. And you can also draw strength from the current provisions, which are stating that if your establishment or factory has normally been functioning on contract labor, continue. They are saying continue, right? Even if it is a poor area, but habitually you are depending on contract labor, please continue. It is published. The second thing they are saying, if there are certain activities which don't require full-time, they are core activities, but don't require full-time, labor or workers, then there also you can have contract labor. And if there is any spike and if there's a sudden requirement, there also you can hire. So may I suggest to you, Paras, so first of all, I will share the Supreme Court judgments with you so that you can counter the DLC. And my advice to you would be that, most HR professionals or most, companies get bogged down at the level of the DLC. In our case, we have fought so many battles for our clients where we have won, our approach is always top down. So please make it a point to meet, the Chief Commissioner Labor, if necessary, meet the Labor Secretary and put your point. I remember this DLC, in Pune, he tried to cancel the contract labor registration of one of our IT clients, saying they can't have manpower suppliers. We took it to the Labor Secretary in Bombay, and he immediately, issued a counter order saying it's perfectly legal. Also, Paras, I want to inform you that even today, each state, has a samadhan. So they've set up an appellate tribunal, so if Labor Department is harassing you in any way, Paras, you should immediately file an online application on the appellate. There is a sitting judge, there's a judge who sits on this. He summons the DLC and they pass the orders very, very quickly. So there's another case, Paras, where a client was being asked for money for a contract labor renewal. So we immediately filed a complaint on this portal. The judge called the DLC in our presence. He was shaking, and within 24 hours, the license was issued. So please take strength from the government's ease of doing business initiatives. And most of these initiatives are online. I'm very happy to share with you that senior government officers are listening. So, wherever SQL is partnering clients in compliance, we are doing that licensing on behalf of clients. We are approaching Labor Secretary, Chief Commissioner, Chief Inspector Factories, and ensuring that no undue prosecution and no undue cancellation of contract labor is happening.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paras. One request, Nandini ji, is that we have more than questions we can handle. So if you can just straight to the answer so that I can finish all of that, and I don't want that people who have joined.
So you need to keep telling me how many questions, so I'll keep my answers brief.
Okay, great. Abhishek, you are next. I'm asking you to unmute yourself. So can you just ask your question?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Govind sir, and thank you, Nandini ma'am. I have two questions. Like when we are having a factory systems and we hire the contractors on an annual basis, so that annual basis contract worker will be treated as a fixed term employment workers, or we can have another workers for their own.
So here, what they're going to see is the history of engagement. Suppose you only hired for a year and then not rehired, then it is fixed term. But if you are rehiring every year, they will see it as a continuity in engagement, right? But if the contract labor has their independent PF and ESIs issuing appointment letters, clearly the mandate is you can continue, despite the 240 days. So there can be no permanency claim. There can be no stoppage of contract labor deployment, provided the appointment letters, PF and ESI of each and every contract labor is archived with you. I want to share with you, given these regulations, SQL has an online compliance portal where every month the vendors are trained to upload appointment letters, PF, ESI, and we keep it ready for the inspector. So with that system, you cannot fail.
Basically, ma'am, there is a cases like the person hires the contractor for a 1 year period, and we issues the appointment letter for a year basis. Then after every year, we renew all those appointment letter. So on yearly basis of renewal of appointment letter, the worker will be treated as a fixed term. So we have to pay to them the gratuity and other allowances, or as per the new code, or we have to issue the appointment letter only for a once time, so that no renewal should be there.
So, it is completely up to it's a business call.
Okay.
So the reason why, contracts are renewed every year is because business wants to evaluate whether they want to continue. What are in COVID, many contracts had to be terminated because business was not in a position to continue. So that's a safety. But clearly, even before the labor codes came into play, we had situations where the same contract labor was getting a fresh appointment letter every year, but working in the same factory for 20 years. So when the client was telling us, how should we calculate his gratuity? Our clients are very compliant. So we would tell them you have to cover the total service period and you have to maintain the PF also. So that's the lookout, So the spirit of the law is very clear that nobody in this country shall be without a proper PF, ESI, gratuity and leave encashment, whether you call him fixed term, regular, temporary, by whatever name, but it must flow. Also, I'd like you to consider the fact that in your existing manpower agreements, they are already, like some of your suppliers like security agency, like Manpower, are already charging you gratuity proportionately for every worker every month. So gratuity, leave encashment, statutory bonus, they are charging from the company month on month. So just relook their contracts and see, how you want to place this.
I think Abhishek has one more question. So Abhishek, I'm asking you to unmute yourself.
So there's a question regarding the new wages code. Like presently, as per new wages codes, the structure of basic plus DA and other allowance will be 50%. So while keeping the view of PF, are the basic structures, can we change them as per PF codes or not? Because the PF law does not allow us to change the basics of any worker's salaries.
Oh, yes. So, when you go in for an annual, so they're only asking you to do one thing. Ensure that you contribute on 15,000 or on 50% of the wages. So to do that, if you need to make changes, they have no problem with that. Their only target is 15,000 or 50%, as per the law, as per your structure.
Thank you. Thank you, Abhishek, for asking this question. Mr. Banerjee, if you are there, I'm asking you to unmute yourself. Please ask your question.
Hello. Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. So I'm Joydeep. I'm from Vesuvius, India.
Hello.
Yeah. Yeah. So, madam, my question is on the PF contribution. So whether it's going to be 12% or it's going to come down to 10%. So we don't have any clarity on that, actually.
So Joydeep, this question, is now only for academic purpose, because first of all, the codes have said it will come down to 10% because, government has received a representation from industry that net take-home pay of employees has to increase, and employees know how to handle their funds and investments. They have better investment options. Having said that, Joydeep, it's very interesting to note that the OSH code says that even after the code commences, for 1 year, the PF and ESI will not change. So if we look at it, for this year and for maybe for the next financial year also, you will not have to tackle this problem of 12% or 10%. But maybe now you can just plan for it, when you're looking at how it is going to impact CTC. And also, Joy, there's another interesting angle to it. The government has said that should any employee, including contract employee, want to contribute above 10%, they can do that, but employer is not mandated to do that. So, just what happened during the COVID situation, where the government for 3 months introduced that the reduction in the PF rate, but they said within a company, different classes of employees can opt whether they want 10% or 12%. And so, today we are used to a system where both the employer and employee are contributing same rate. Now, Joydeep, in the new OSH code, they're proposing that there can be a permutation and combination where employee is giving more, employer is giving less as per the mandate. Or it could be contributory, and within the same company, different classes of employees could be opting for different rates. That is what is proposed in the OSH code. However, they go on to state that even after it commences, for 1 year, the PF and ESI systems will not change, except the definition of wage.
Okay, thank you, madam. Just one more query related to this. So nowadays the corporates are going hue and cry on, take-home salary is going to reduce and all those things. But with this PF change, definitely the take-home salary is going to increase. So why are the corporates there is no, hue and cry and communication regarding this PF change? That is another thing which is coming to our mind, actually. To my mind.
Because, Joydeep, like I said, you have to cut through the hype. And, you have to maybe work with consultants who can cut through the hype for you and help you to see the right picture. The other thing is that, the employee benefits is set to increase. Like, today what a person is getting under gratuity, tomorrow he's getting much more. Today, the leave encashment a person is getting, tomorrow he gets much more. So those benefits are also increasing, right?
Yeah. Thank you, Jaideep. And let's move on to Pankaj Kumar. Pankaj, I'm asking you to unmute. Can you just ask your question?
Yeah, good afternoon, Mr. Govind and Nandini ma'am. My question is, in some states, they have their notification for hiring of 75% of local employees like Maharashtra and Gujarat. So is there any relaxation in wage code, like, for this compulsion? It's very difficult for the HR personnel to hire the local employees like, like Gujaratis, Maharashtrians, from the specific experience related to their qualification, experience, each and everything. So is there any relaxation in that?
So, the 4 codes do not speak of local hiring. Rather, they're all for migrant laborers coming in and working, and they're asking you to support that migrant labor, right? But if we look at the recent, Haryana, like, Joydeep was mentioning, I would like to, suggest the same thing to you. You have to read between the lines, and, then the law will not appear to be that draconian. Like recently, when the Haryana government said that 75% has to be hired from Haryana, the media or, most people did not see what was the rider. The rider said only for positions up to 50,000 a month, and if the skill set is matching the company's requirement. So, if you read those provisions carefully, you will see that those checks and balances are already there. That, what is the threshold of salary which you can engage locally? And if you can report, I'll give you another example. A lot of, private sector companies were very scared to report vacancies under the Employment Exchanges Act, because they felt the government would put pressure on them, to take the government-sponsored employees. So most private sector companies, even today, continue to be non-compliant under the Employment Exchanges Act because of this fear. But this fear is not justified, because the Employment Exchanges Act clearly states there will be no solicitation from the government if you report the vacancies. And now, under the new labor codes, I was mentioning to you, sir, that the government is coming up with different digital reporting portals like Shram Suvidha portal, Samadhan portal, Unorganized Sector portal, and the 4th portal that they're proposing is employment monitoring. So every company in this country, irrespective of the nature of services, will have to report their monthly vacancies online. But the government has said that does not create any obligation on you to hire from government sources. So please take, the safety of those provisions. It is not a blanket provision, and it can be easily contested on the basis of skill, merit, and salary threshold.
Great, thank you. So I think we are already 12:17, and we have 13 minutes left, and we always value time of our audience here. And I know there are so many questions coming up. I'll take few, but Nandini, can I ask you, if I know that we cannot take all of them, and there are a lot of questions in the chat box, are you open to answer those questions offline, and we can put them on our website and share the link with our people? And I think you mentioned that a lot of notification you wanted to share with our audience. Maybe you can share that with us and we can put. Okay,
Sure.
Great. I would request Payal, who is our manager of webinar, to kind of collaborate with Nandini and take these questions forward and make that happen.